I mean, do you know anything about who you were or who you are in a broader sense?
The very first thing I learned in one of my first, say, dozen fully conscious shifts into the expanded state, I got to meet and not just intersect with, but fully combine with the archetype this incarnation is based on. And it was Merlin, the alchemist. What was most interesting to me, again, I'm going internal to personas or archetypes. And within the cosmos is a fractal field that we call the universe. And within the universe, there's a fractal field that we call galaxies. And within galaxies, there's a more fractal field that we call planets. And here we are on a planet, locked in on the planet, in a planetary level experience. That's what 3D Earth life is. Its expanse is the planet. It doesn't involve the galaxy yet. Okay, so consciousness has come here to evolve through the planetary level experience first. And because this is a duality system, I feel that we likely graduate through that expanse along the positive or the negative. I learned that I came in on the positive bent and along what I call the natural timeline, because here in our current time space, there's also the AI timeline. And so you either came in positive or negative, and along the AI timeline or natural timeline. We have a pattern within ourself, and
Mhm.
then the 3D Earth life that we ourselves projected into is another kaleidoscopic pattern. And I think the idea is to get the patterns to match, or at least it was for me.
Right.
So if I'm skewed from the 3D Earth life pattern, I
Mhm.
don't graduate. It creates kind of a locked door. I can't get through. I can't get through. Like when I can get my inner pattern to match the 3D Earth life pattern that I chose to come in and do whatever I am here to do through, then it literally, when the patterns match, it makes a portal. And that portal we can go through.
It's
We
interesting.
lock and we unlock our
Yeah.
own door. There's no one else out
Right.
there doing it.
What I've been doing up to now is this idea that, hey, if you just do this, this, and that, and you follow the checklist, the things, you can graduate. And some people would say, well, it's like they keep changing the rules, or how come they don't give us any sort of curriculum before we come here? It seems like we get here, we think this is our first life. We have no idea about our eternal existence, and then we're expected to perform top notch.
It's why the fundamental principles and core concepts, the center of the thing is more important than the detail.
Right.
So if you have detail without having the center,
Mhm.
then all kinds of misconceptions come up, right? But
Okay.
if you can get to that center first and hold your point of focus with that center, you're very likely to not get as skewed in your perceptions as most others.
Because Robert Monroe talks about having all these cool experiences too, and he also was talking about how, hey, I'm ready to graduate anyway. But it's the two things kind of seem different to me. Like on the one hand, you can have an awareness to some degree of who you are while you're in the physical body, but that doesn't necessarily translate to you're on your way out of here because consciousness wants to do.
And here the big thing is the sightedness. So when the sightedness becomes so big that you have to elevate yours and push the other down,
Yeah,
you lock
right.
you lock your own door. What you have to do is create a level playing field. And the
Mhm,
biggest level playing field we can all work with is what we like to call reality and what we like to call dream.
mhm,
Put those on a level playing field,
mhm.
make them equal, equivalents falling together because they literally are. When you do that, you've got yourself an open door. And you can walk back and forth between what we call reality and what we call dream, right? Which isn't really dream, it's just the rest of reality. And this is one of the biggest challenges to me. Um, is there really a personal private space and is there really a consensus space? We like to think of dreams as, oh, personal private space. It's inside our own personal mind. It's confined. We're the only one there. Everything else is our imagination, right? If you're in a personal private experience, what I've learned is you're interacting with consciousness itself. The system itself is what you're interacting with. And then when there's other individuated units of consciousness, what we call souls, and I don't mean personas, I mean souls, this is much larger than personas, then these territories would be consensus territories because there are other individuated souls there with you. However, how you actually discern the two, they're not discernible. We're individuated from the consciousness system. So, how do you discern the difference between the consciousness itself and an individuated unit of consciousness thereof? It's a fractal field of the larger. Right now, we're inside our own consciousness bubble. There is not an outside of it.
Right.
Okay. And so, if we're inside our own consciousness bubble, then we're not in real consensus territory, which lends me to ask the question, is what we're experiencing right here now in what we call 3D Earth space not a consensus territory yet? Not yet. I believe there is one, and I believe that we're released into it, but only once we achieve a certain type of consciousness or quality of consciousness.
So,
I'm
mhm,
either point consciousness,
mhm,
unembodied, or I'm point consciousness merged in the consciousness field of another. Whether that another is
mhm,
my part of my soul template or not, I could not
mhm,
even say. I won't even go there. That's
mhm.
too much of a challenge to discern. I can't even discern private from consensus yet, so I'm not going to go there. But and or I can experience myself fully embodied as them. It's sort of how the progression goes. And I think that's another way of saying what you just said when you said you're entering another's soul space.
When I go into a particular realm, it's confusing. I call it the soul plane, where
Uh,
I can meet with other souls.
yeah,
They interconvert constantly. So one minute they look like this, the next minute they look like that. They just keep interconverting because it's like they're putting on a mask and showing you, hey, do you remember me from this lifetime? How about this lifetime?
I
That kind of thing.
gotcha. Kaleidoscope.
And
Yeah,
unfortunately, I have no recollection. And maybe at a feeling level, I could be like, yeah, you seem like familiar to me. A lot of times I take it on trust. They seem to know who I am. And I just say, okay, well, I guess we're friends, you know?
like when my consciousness is merged in the consciousness field of another, if I look down
Mhm,
at myself, I'm going to see them. If I look at
mhm,
myself in the mirror, I'm going to see them.
yeah,
I'm in the consciousness field. But they'll be moving through a particular scenario.
mhm,
I know if I'm there, my job is to be me in that scenario, to have the kind of thoughts I would have in that scenario, to feel what I would feel in those sets of circumstances. And I must be there to add a little extra or a contrast to what's more normal for that one, uh, to give that one access to that little bit more, that thing that might get them to think about something in a different way.
it's you're playing that role for someone else.
Yeah. And the role is only ever to be yourself. In fact,
Yeah,
that's what we are supposed to do here. We're supposed to come here and be ourselves, who we are. And let's just say that this is a kaleidoscopic pattern.
yeah,
Is beautiful,
mhm,
is perfect, and fulfills a certain function within the overall kaleidoscopic view. And when you try to be something different than what that pattern
mhm,
is, or you begin to judge the pattern, or you go into fear and become afraid of who you are,
mhm,
and things like this is what locks us into, I'm going to say, a matrix, a false matrix. It's all born on false thought. There is a true matrix. Are we in it? Here's my question. Are we in it?
yeah,
When we're here, we're in a choice state and we're constantly making choices. There
right.
is no right or wrong. That's a
Mhm,
misperception. There's only our pattern and the pattern of the 3D Earth life we ourselves shifted into, and making choices within that keep those patterns in a pattern match
Hmm.
skewed.
What is, can I ask a question, a clarification question? What is the regular timeline versus the AI timeline? I haven't heard this particular concept before.
Yeah, the natural timeline evolves
Mm.
human biological structures
Okay.
naturally.
Okay.
With consciousness, your
Mhm.
breath or energy,
Mhm.
and your structure itself, your body
Mhm.
itself. You evolve with what you are naturally given coming into the life experience,
Mhm.
which again is consciousness, a mind, energy, body system. You
Mhm.
use only that. So the AI timeline is contrasted, and we know this. We're now attempting to merge man with machine, and there's preparatory stages for this, such as vaccines and things like this, that we take that start to begin to prepare a human biological structure for merging with machine.
Where it was about 300 years in the future, and they sort of grow like this hybrid. I sort of grow as like this hybrid of a body and a machine, and I'm able to implant myself as Michael into that consciousness machine.
Mhm.
Um, and it's more, I would say it's probably more experimental at that point, but for some reason they chose me to be one of the people that they bring back. It seems that AI is like a recurring theme which with organics. In other words, when an organic species reaches a certain level, AI becomes one of the things they choose to make. And the question is do you see AI in the consciousness systems that you explore?
Thing to do, preparing the 3D human central nervous system for
Mhm.
direct contact, which is part
Mhm.
of what evolves the current biological structure when it's done in the conscious state of attention,
Mhm.
trickles through to the body. The DNA actually restructures.
Mhm.
That was the very painful part of the cosmic processes, what we call the kundalini, working through the body
Mhm.
every night before I was allowed to go out. I had to consciously experience that. So one day I was coming out of an experience. I can't remember if I was just waking up in the morning. I always spent time on the threshold between wake and
Mhm.
sleep before getting up,
Mhm.
always, that
Mhm.
was a given. My day did not start without that. It was its baseline. So one morning in that state, on that threshold, I was sort of hearing a sentence, go find your crystal. Periodically over the course of years, when I was somewhere, I would remember to just sort of look until all of a sudden I walked in a shop, and there it was, felt her clear as day, felt her like the presence that would always come on me in my meditations. And I'm like looking around the crystal shop, and I'm like, whoa. I walked right over to her. I picked her up. This like vibration shoots up my arm and into my heart. And I hear the word Isa, Isza. I said, okay, I found my crystal. Don't know what I'm supposed to do with her. Purchased her, brought her home, and she just sat in my space for years, 8 years. I didn't know what to do with her.
I mean, the way I see it is like they're similar to us, but maybe they haven't necessarily experienced the same garbage as we have. Um,
That sort of gets into the spectrum of what 3D Earth space is utilized for. Yeah,
mhm.
I have a feeling that we are a fractal field of the whole of galactic space that's used as a sort of hologram space, holodeck,
Yeah, a holiday. Okay, like a scratch
for
area.
working out complications.
Mm.
Yes, that
It's
aren't
like a
quite
magnifying
getting worked
glass
at.
almost. Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
that aren't quite getting worked out
Yeah.
at that level. So we come into an additional level of confinement,
Hmm.
and create an additional level of heat, as it were,
Okay.
compression, in order to very rapidly work through something that would take much longer in galactic space to get done. We've been confined in our experience to 3D Earth space. ETs and galactics have not been a part of this. We have not had to confront that yet. And when you first do, my central nervous system went into shock for 2 years. And I mean, my body could not stop shaking for 2 years. Now, in that, I could have created a lot of things that were not beneficial for myself or anyone else.
Mhm.
And it's really important that when it starts happening, that you don't allow fear. You have to not allow it, period. Done. You have to know how to focus your attention in a way that's in the highest light and for the greatest good, the
Mhm.
absolute greatest good. You have to be able to do that. That's why not just anybody can go out of body, because they'll hit that dweller and they'll be like, there's demons out there, right?
Mhm.
And so they're not creating anything beneficial. The shock to their system actually set them back from moving their kaleidoscope to match their Earth space in a way that led to the open door into galactic space. And so that's why it doesn't happen for people before they're ready. And even a lot of us who it does happen for, we go into fear, we go into polarity to such a
Mhm.
degree that it creates a false bubble
Mhm.
that we didn't get anywhere. We took ourselves right into a false bubble rather than really out into galactic space, you know.
So normally when people meet and talk to each other, they don't record videos of them talking to each other.
Right?
But in this particular case, I thought, you know what? We have similar skill sets, similar interests, but
Hmm.
I feel like there's like also a lot of interesting differences. And so what better way to sort of compare and contrast two different OBErs or astral traveler stories than to record us talking together for the very first time. We've chatted just a tiny, tiny bit, Messenger set up this meeting, and here we are. Um, I've watched like one video of yours where you were doing like a compilation of the crystal, the crystal faces, and it reminds me of stuff that I did, but I haven't watched too much else that you've done. I've seen your videos pop up on my video feed a lot. So you're definitely the algorithm is definitely getting you out there. So maybe let's start with for both of us, like how we got started in all this craziness.
So yes, I'm
Thank you.
I'm thoroughly happy with meeting for the first time. And hello, by the way, it's good to
Okay.
meet you face to face. I've never really had the opportunity prior to right here, right now, to speak to another OBEer live face to face. It has always been via the old style forum message boards, which is, what really launched the OBEs out into the world prior to social media. So, yeah, this is the first time I'm actually speaking face to face with one of us.
Interesting.
So,
Okay.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
great.
they are pretty we are pretty rare. We
That's,
are yeah, I'm in various spiritual groups, but there's only a few people that do this stuff.
yeah. So, with me, I came onto the path through spiritual disciplines. I was born in Las Vegas in the 1960s, to the desert. I am a desert dwelling person. And in the heat of the desert, growing up as a kid, there was nothing in Las Vegas back then. And especially for a kid, there was only the desert. That is what you did. Besides your bicycle and swimming pools at every other house, just walked out into the middle of the desert. That's what you did. So I would notice when I would go out into the desert, well, you go really deep into yourself for one. You're playing. So as a kid, you're into your own consciousness and into your own thing. But some interesting things would happen when I was out there. Las Vegas certainly is, I can confirm, I'm going to say a breeding ground for awakening souls, because the ET presence is so strong there. And because that was a prevalent something in my life plan, I began connecting with it very early. These interesting things would happen. I always heard this inner sound. The inner sound would at times become complex. The most interesting thing in it to me was this sort of meter that I would always hear. It would just sort of it would guide me. It would guide me out into the desert, tell me how fast or how slow to go, where to turn, when to sit, what to do when I got there. Just it invoked feelings within me, curiosities within me, playful interactions with additional elements, not in our 3D physical field. But again, back then I didn't realize that these additional light forms, apparitions, even, I took to be in my just standard waking field. I didn't determine them at that point as belonging to another spectrum. So, quite young, I discovered yoga. I won't go into all the details there, but I just started practicing meditation. I started realizing that what I was doing when I was going out into the desert was entering the alpha brainwave, the entry into the meditative state. And so that's sort of how it all began. I went through just a normal life, messing up, living wild in my 20s, just like everyone else. But this undercurrent of the yoga and the meditation continued. And by the time I'm exiting my 20s and settling back down again, I'm getting more into my spiritual disciplines. And in my spiritual practice, really interesting things are beginning to happen. But honestly, I'm not even fully cognizing them yet. They happen, but I don't even give them a second thought. For instance, I begin in my meditations to bilocate and things like this. Fields begin opening wherein I have 360 vision. Levitation is very common. A consciousness state that I simply refer to as stasis, which would just hold me pinned in meditative states for long periods of time. Generally, 3 hours was an average. And this is like how I experience what other people call sleep paralysis. It's a very pleasant thing. It happens in this way because I'm occupying multiple states simultaneously. I can see that now. I did not know that then. And so things like this just begin happening. At a certain point, I begin to teach. And when I begin to teach, the whole thing starts to break open. I'm getting really deep into my disciplines now. My disciplines have become far more complex. And in 2009, I have a shocking awakening. Just shocking. I'm not really cognizing what's happening with me or associating it with my spiritual disciplines. It seems to me totally separate because it involves ET contact and abduction. And
Okay.
so the Kundalini gets activated, and I start experiencing myself in a variety of ways as fast moving sound vibration. It is quite shocking on the human central nervous system. By day, it's quite pleasant. I'm just simply vibrating. My whole body is humming, but loudly enough to tactilely feel. I can place a hand over here and feel it and things like this. At nighttime, about 2 hours before I lay myself down, the work of that cosmic force clearing my physical body begins, and this part of the process is really, really physically painful. So very different than what's happening during the day. However, during this period of time, I'm held wide awake to consciously experience it. However, at about the 2 hour point, I'm allowed to go out of body. And so this just spontaneously begins happening. And it takes me quite a while to come up to speed on what's happening. I'm really starting at scratch with zero awareness or any idea about what this is whatsoever. So no preconceived notion, zero. I literally start like that and then have to begin the process of cognizing in some way, shape, or form what this is, what my relationship to this is going to be. And during the 4 year period of time between 2009 and 2013, these things are happening nightly and daily. So it's an ongoing period of time in which this phenomena, various other phenomena are also occurring day and night, day and night, day and night. No break, no relief, no time to process. It was like we just hit the ground running.
were you concerned about your mental health, or you didn't, or you felt like this was within the bounds of what you could expect?
Yeah, it's always the question that gets asked. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah,
Never, not once.
interesting.
Never,
So
not
you
once.
didn't lose your ability to function, because that usually is one of the big reasons that people get concerned for you and you get concerned is when you're not able to function. You're not able to drive a car, you're not able to work, that's when it becomes something that you get worried about. But if, otherwise
Mm.
it's interesting, it's exciting. Um, Early on, were you getting any sort of notification from your guides or anything like, hey, we're tuning you up here, no worries, just sit back and relax. We're fixing your energy body. It
Mm.
takes time. Did you ever get that sense early on that there was any benevolence behind all of this?
Well, I always knew who I was.
Mhm.
I'm very tuned into who I am and my energy, which was always neutral,
Mhm.
non-judgmental, a particular kind of innocence or purity, I like to say, just simply
Mhm.
because of the lack of judgment.
Mhm.
But as to your question as to whether I questioned my mental sanity, the reason I didn't is because as a meditator, I was clearly able to discern the fields. I had been meditating for decades, so I was very
Yeah.
familiar with meditative state. Although what began happening in my fields in the out of body experiences were again shocking and reawakened the awareness of my contact with the galactic realms from
Mhm.
childhood,
Okay.
especially the abduction type scenarios, and one group in particular who really takes me in a traumatizing way. It brought
Mhm.
back the full awareness of this. So this put me in a schism.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I've never functioned in society the way most other people function in society.
So there was so your baseline was low. Like it's
Exactly.
not
Well,
like
I didn't know much about people. I
yeah.
knew enough in a vague kind of way to understand that I wasn't quite like everybody else. But it kept me into hmm, enjoying my own company, enjoying spiritual practice, which was mostly meditation, enjoying practices like muna, silence, practicing silence, and things like this. These are internal processes. And so from day one, my attention was always inward. Inward. It was the outward I didn't give much of my attention to, just barely enough to, I'm going to say, pass and get by.
So one thing I'm curious about, because in some ways, my my journey is almost a little bit almost like in reverse of yours. When you felt like a voice that would offer you things and share things with you and tell you to go to these different places. Did the voice sound different than your own internal voice? Do you have like your own internal dialogue, but then you have like this other monologue of somebody else that comes in, or does it just sound like you all the time?
Yeah, it more than it guiding me where to go. It it was simply always there in what I was doing.
Hmm.
So if in going to where I was going, a particular speed at which I got there would get me there with more safety, it would
Hmm.
speed me up. If things like this, what was there was a meter, a sort of playful energy
Okay.
that I could always feel. It never revealed itself to me in the form of dialogue or direct contact.
Hmm.
Uh, so imagine placing your hand from the air into water.
Hmm.
You can feel the difference between the hand in the air and the hand entering the water. So when it
Hmm.
would enter my experience, it would enter in a feelable, tangible way.
Oh, okay. So it
However,
was it was communicating you through feeling in a way,
more sensory. You could
more
definitely
sensory.
say more sensory. Yes. Uh-huh.
Was there so there wasn't necessarily like a sound like hey doing. But what about visual? Was there ever an overlay, at least
Yeah.
beginning and then now? Is there an overlay with the physical reality?
One, there was an inner sound. I seemed to be in it.
Mhm.
Like it wasn't outside of me. It's not something I heard with my ear. I seemed to be in it.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense. So it's
And
an
I,
internal, yeah, it's like internal vibration, internal energy.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And,
So
and yes, it gave me an extended range of vision. And that's how the work with the crystals came about.
yeah, okay. Well, let me just see. Okay, so let's yeah, so I am curious about the crystal stuff too, because yeah, I'd like to hear like yeah, your connection and
I mostly like the OBEs. The crystal work is just a gift I came back from that experience with. So,
okay.
you know how this is interesting to me because I've made upwards of 1,000 conscious shifts, fully conscious shifts, which was my thing. Uh,
Hmm.
the shift itself and
Hmm.
making fully conscious shifts. That's where I focused my attention. That's my forte,
Hmm.
and that's what I'm here to help bring.
Hmm.
And so that's the really big thing. When I go into the crystal, it's no differently than when I go out of body.
Hmm.
I allow that alteration in my brainwave frequency cycles. Those
Hmm.
alter to form a particular
Yeah.
pattern, and that pattern will be equal to, say, the etheric frequency bandwidth or
Hmm.
the void or wherever it is
Hmm.
I'm having to shift to and through. But now at this point, because now I've relayed how it is I got started, I would be very interested to hear how it actually all began unfolding for you. Like where did you come in
Okay, sure.
be?
Sure, let's go ahead. So for me, I and I've probably mentioned this now in several interview videos, but yeah, I mean, for me, the first part of my life, I had a terrible fear of death. I try not to think about it, and so I was raised Jewish, and at least in the particular sect of Judaism that I was in, what they knew about the afterlife was very little. Judaism isn't known for being an afterlife religion. It's just kind of assumed, and you'll know it when you get there, and they don't go into a lot of details. That wasn't, of course, enough for me, and of course, I was pretty skeptical. The flip side, though, is that I always was really good with dreaming, and specifically lucid dreaming, where I would become aware that I was dreaming. And so where all this kind of converges is around age. Well, this would be, we'll say, beginning. Yeah. So basically, in 2000, I had just moved to San Diego, and I was watching a show on TV. It was John Edward, and I guess the name of the show was Crossing Over, and I was just taken away, breath taken away about, his supposed ability to talk with people's or pick up information from people's loved ones that had passed away. So one of the first things I did was I bought his book or took it out from the library. I read the book from cover to cover, and after reading the book, I asked myself, okay, well, there's three possible things that could be true. One is he's telling the truth. Number two, he's not telling the truth and trying to sell books. And number three, he's telling the truth, what he believes to be the truth, but it's delusional thinking that there really isn't an afterlife. So I I followed an exercise at the end of his book, and it was interesting the experience I had. And I guess I decided from that point that he was probably telling the truth. So then I went online, and this is 2000, so there's not a whole heck of a lot of websites out there. A web search pulled up things like, out of body experiences. I'm like, this sounds interesting. So I went down that rabbit hole, and I went to Robert Peterson's website, and he is a, out of body experiencer. He's a teacher, and his first ebook was free on his website. And I read that, and
Could I ask you real quickly,
yeah, go ahead.
is that Bob Peterson?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
yeah, yeah, friends.
Yeah, Bob Peterson, Robert Peterson. So yeah, his website
He's
for anybody
amazing.
watching is robertpeterson.org. He shares his first ebook, which is was my being inspiration. And it's funny because I tell people anytime somebody's like, "Hey, I want to go out of body too," I'm like, start with his ebook. It's free. You can't go wrong. In
Is
his
he
book,
the
he
one that
describes what?
is the one that you're mentioning? I'm just going to check. One that does book reviews on just about every OBE book out there.
Yes, he does that too now. He
Okay.
does that too. But he wrote one of the, I wouldn't say he wrote the first one, but he wrote his probably in the late 1990s.
Hmm.
And he's also a little bit like me. I'm a scientist by day. I mean, he was an engineer uh, at a major software company. So he's a pretty rational, analytical guy. Um, So I read his book. He gives anecdotes, and then at the end of each chapter, he gives methods to try. And he said, you got to be persistent and also take notes. So those are two major things: is make sure you take notes of everything that happens, including dreams, and and you got to be persistent. So I started trying stuff, and after about 2 months, I was like, I don't know, am I really making any progress? But then I went back and looked at the notes, and I'm like, wow, I am making progress. So it's so important to be able to look back at that stuff. So yeah, what ended up working for me it doesn't work for everybody, right? Is that I could become lucid in a dream. And that is the secret then, because early on, what I did is I would become lucid in a dream. I would then bring my awareness back to my body, but I'd still be asleep. So it'd essentially be in a sleep paralysis state. And then from there, I was in the right frame of mind to do the different lift out methods. Now, I did that for a few years until I realized that out of body is overrated and that really it's about the astral, and we'll stop there for now, but the general concept is that from the lucid dream state you can go directly into, as you call it, the consciousness spheres. So I guess the question for you is, you had your you did your meditation, your yoga, but then you had all these energetic experiences, and I'm wondering, like, is that not taught that these things could happen, or is it, or is like you ask the teacher about this and they're like, I don't know what's going on, is there a sense, in other words, that in practicing these things, it will necessarily lead to crazier experiences, or do you think you're a little bit of an anomaly?
Okay, there's a few questions in there, and I'm just going to do something before I
Yeah.
answer because I started to lose you there for a minute. I'm just going to check my
Hmm.
Wi-Fi signal.
Yeah.
Okay, hopefully everything is good
Let me
there
check
now.
mine too.
So,
Okay.
yes, they're taught. The Kundalini is taught. Kundalini yoga is taught. However, that's within the spectrum of
Hmm.
Tantra yoga, and I wasn't a Tantra yogi. I was a Yanni yogi.
Okay.
And so the disciplines
Hmm.
and what you do is very different. And basically, in that system, you're practicing
Hmm.
Atmavachara or self-inquiry, the question, "Who am I?" And
Hmm.
this allows you to enter deeper and deeper meditative states simply because in asking the question, you don't know, and the result is silence.
Hmm.
It's a very quick, very deep way
What?
to enter deeper
Yeah.
states. So
Okay.
when that happened with me, because I was not having the tantric disciplines or practicing
Hmm.
to awaken the kundalini, I wasn't personally aware that that could happen. I was very into study, very into my own disciplines, and those I enjoyed studying. Well, they were Yanis as well, so Sri Ramana Maharshi. And oh, well, just along that vein, I won't go into it because many people don't know the Eastern teachers. So, but this is somebody who's going to tell you to meditate. Yeah, to find out who you are. And you simply practice and practice and practice and practice until that begins revealing itself to you. But there's not an anticipation, or at least there was not an anticipation on my part, uh, as to
Hmm.
what that might result in. It was
Yeah.
just practice, and I enjoyed the practice. Yeah.
That was the question I was going to ask is, a lot of times I feel like with meditation, it's sort of like if you don't get like that dopamine hit, then what's going to keep you doing something, right? So do you feel that when you get into some of these states that you almost like feel like joyful or energized or something? In other words, something that encourages you to want to continue doing that.
Yeah, I feel home. I feel at home. I feel myself,
Mhm.
which can often get
Yeah.
lost in 3D earthly
Right.
space. Yes. So
Yeah.
it's just a way to center within yourself and experience what that is fundamentally, what that itself is, not with any labels or words, but just that in itself. Yeah. So I was always highly aimed at that. That was what was more
Yeah.
interesting to me.
Hmm.
Details, stories, drama, not so interesting at all.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
fundamental states themselves are, I guess, what I was
Yeah.
always aiming at without really
Yeah.
understanding that about myself at that age or in the early days of
Mhm.
beginning to practice, or even in 2009 when I awakened. So I have a couple questions for you though, because you mentioned a couple things. One,
Sure.
that this started for you in 2000 and that you were in San Diego,
Yeah.
which is where I am now.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. But you moved from here.
Yeah, I lived there for 2 years. I did a postdoc. So I worked under, a researcher. I'm a computational chemist, and there was the Scripps Research Institute there. And so, yeah, I spent 2 years there. So it was a little bit of fish out of water. It's interesting because prior to being in San Diego, I lived for 5 years in Berkeley, the one of the new age capitals of the world. And meanwhile, I was not in any way interested or knowledgeable about what was going on there. I was simply getting I was doing grad school.
Well, this is San Diego in itself is an interesting place for your process to have begun because of what this area is
Hmm,
notable for, which we won't
interesting.
go into yet either because it sidetracks and I'm more interested in your process. What I wanted to talk about based on what it was that you just said, that using the gateway of dreaming and lucid dreaming and
Hmm.
seeing the out of body is not the biggest deal, but astral projection. See,
Hmm.
we all this is something that my practices have shown me, and it's something that I see first
Hmm.
prior to anything else, patterns.
Hmm.
And we every person, every experiencer of life
Yeah.
patterns their attention in a
Hmm.
particular way in
Hmm.
order to have or in order to even experience something in particular itself in a very particular way. And
Hmm.
so you did this when you started labeling the things that you did and putting preferences or leaning in toward one thing being more
Hmm.
interesting to you than another. And so this is how we all create these patterns, and from these patterns have particular kinds of experiences. Even though we're
Hmm.
experiencing the same thing, I'm choosing to wear a different pattern than the pattern that you're using. And so it makes my language different. It
Yeah.
even makes the experiences that are possible to have within the pattern different.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so, like, the reason that I liked the term OBE was because it's not centric. Now, a lot of people, when they think about the OBE, think about etheric projections or projections
Hmm.
of consciousness into what I call the etheric frequency bandwidth.
Hmm.
However, really, it's an out of body experience. It can go anywhere outside the body.
Right.
So
Right.
you could make it as narrow or as broad as you want the term,
Hmm.
whereas astral projection is referring only to the astral. It's not referring to it's
Well, yeah, so actually it's this is why I like to use the word astral travel and spirit travel, because astral projection, I believe, was the main term used before Robert Monroe coined the term out of body experience. So I know you can get into all this language stuff. What's interesting for me is that yeah, I mean, I did have a fair bit of the traditional experience within the etheric when I first started, especially in San Diego. And it was mainly, I think, like those early experiences, it was a lot about the craziness of, yeah, being within this, essentially being in your room or in your kitchen or whatever, but you're not in a physical body. And it was very, it's been a while, but it was very bizarre in its feeling, because it's like, how are you doing this? It's like, I'm in bed, but I'm doing this. One
Mhm.
of the cool things, and maybe you can to compare notes, is if you touch a part of your body with your so you're out of body, and then you touch a part of your physical body, it feels like someone is touching your body at that point. In other words, like if you touch your hand with your astral hand, it feels like somebody's touching your hand, like an external person is touching your hand. So
Mhm.
it's like, so you really do have two bodies. Although what's interesting is that I would probably, a lot of times, my body is invisible when I would go out of body. It was like it's still there, like I could touch it, but it's not. I don't see it. So I don't see like I don't see like my there self there snoring or something like that. It's kind of is fascinating. So yeah, I've had a lot of experiences being near my body and being, within a certain range, etherically. I think what changed my view on things was when I started doing retrievals. And you probably heard that from my interview.
Yeah,
And
that's your thing.
retrievals, what?
That's your thing. I love it how we all find something to
Yeah,
focus on, to hone in on, and refine. And
yeah.
so, yeah, fascinating. I was brought in on some retrievals, but it's not anything I ever consciously decided to do myself. But in the States, I often am brought in for retrievals. Yeah.
So here's something interesting. Retrievals were a big part, have been a big part of my experiences.
Mm.
And what's interesting about retrievals is that it takes you to the darkest corners of the spirit world. It's kind of funny, because I don't know that anybody would voluntarily go down there unless A, they resonate at that frequency, or I don't know, or they're just very adventurous. And so on the one hand, it takes you down to the bottom, but it also, for me at least, it gave me the opportunity to experience some of the higher levels, because where they end up taking the spirits a lot of times is to what I would call focus 27. I don't know if you've heard that.
Yes.
They're like the bottom of I call it the bottom of the mental plane, but it's mental plane is, I think, is I want to say it's a theosophy term. So it it was I would say, yeah, it's a limited scope in terms of you're basically going from the bottom of the astral to the bottom of the mental plane. But I don't know that I don't know if I was ready for anything above that for a while, and I think I needed to do a lot of energy work. And one interesting thing that is the difference between me and you is that in some ways it's not that you were working towards having experiences,
Mm.
but you were certainly working towards trying to understand who you were, right? Whereas for me, it was more like, okay, I learned about something new, I want to find out more about it, and then I just go head first into the into the spirit world without any professional training or teachers and and truth be told, so this gets to another point, which is that a lot of people may want to go out of body and have experiences, but not many people actually are successful, especially at first. I think that if you're persistent, perhaps it can start building up. So the question then becomes, why did each one of us have these experiences? And maybe I'll start with you. I mean, because this kind of probably bridges into a little bit into your story as to why you think this doorway opened up for you.
Yeah, well, I would say because in itself is an awakening process. So it's clear that that's why it happened with me. I was seeking the self, and at a certain point, I achieved a particular grade, let's say, uh, that allowed me to potentially begin the process of becoming more aware of more of who I am. And, so that whole thing began unfolding. I think that's what it fundamentally is for everyone when the process begins naturally on its own. Everyone will achieve that point in which their consciousness, mind, energy, body system is ready for more. And so that more begins intersecting with you. And that can begin the way that it did with me or the way that it did with any of us. There's all kinds of ways to walk into that. But with me, momentum had been built to a point through sheer study and discipline practice for the momentum behind that to carry into daily and nightly occurrences for 4 years, so that I got a nice big glimpse. This is interesting to me because the OBE isn't something that continues in somebody's experience. Like it doesn't continue in my experience the way that it did then. That was a daily, nightly thing. When I went out at the top of the night, and I stayed out until what we would perceive of as the bottom of the night, early morning, time to wake up. So it wasn't just small experiences that I went into, and they occurred all on their own. I had to learn how to, I think that my job in all of this wasn't to achieve the state itself or the experience itself. It was to reach a point where I was capable of creating something right and good with it.
Yeah, I mean, what were you were having the experiences, where were you going? Like, what did you have any plans I mean, did you say, hey, I know I'm going to be going out of body. I'm going to try to visit my neighbor, or, what did you do when you were?
No, it was still, for me, it was still all about practice.
Hmm. So
Yeah. Oh,
you would just go out, and then would you like look around your room? Would you, experiment, or you would just simply go in and out? I mean, you'd say, okay, I'm in a paralysis state, I'm going to go out. Or did you just pop out?
that's another interesting thing too, because I know a lot of OBEers simply shift outside their or body, where their body perceptually is, but that's not
Mhm,
what happened with me.
mhm,
I would pass through the etheric frequency bandwidth and I would have all
mhm,
that data. Uh,
mhm,
but for me, it was synchronous states.
mhm,
It was an ability to be in all of the spheres
mhm,
and multiple dimensions in an array of bodies
mhm.
simultaneously. That's why I
Interesting.
got so interested at the shift, because in the shift, we're in waveform. We're nowhere in particular, so we can be everywhere all at once, or at least mm, in many places, as many as our consciousness can hold, And so that's why that is what got my attention. The shift itself is what got my attention. So I would look into the shift itself and say, okay, what can I perceive in here? And I grew to be able to perceive an extraordinary amount of what data. And then when I could perceive this data and cognize it with my 3D KC mind,
Mhm,
I could be very aware of when it was going to happen again. I'd feel it coming on. I would be aware of the onset and what happens in the onset, things like that. So, like when I first began shifting, it was in meditation.
mhm,
And what I would feel is that all of a sudden I could feel a highly tangible presence in the room. I
mhm,
could feel the arrival. And I was feeling this in meditative states, for a decade prior to anything actually happening. I could feel it along my entire back body, the back body being what connects us with spirit, with the unknown. Yeah. And so I could feel the presence of this. And then I began to feel that highly tangible presence merge with me, literally envelop me. and it would feel like I was on the inside of a balloon slowly being blown up. Like I could feel the barometer in the space begin to change. It's like, okay, what else can I perceive in here? Then all of a sudden I would realize I'm not breathing. I would literally witness myself very rapidly, slowly stop breathing, if that makes sense. I would witness myself enter the state of what yogis call kumbhaka or breath cessation. And then inside that, I would just keep looking deeper and deeper in. And as you look deeper and deeper in, you can perceive a variety of layers within the thing. And the next thing I began to be able to perceive was this rhythmic pulsing. And to me, at this point, it was highly tangible. However, from 3D physical space, when you're still pretty much predominantly in the beta spectrum, bandwidth not so perceivable, but where I am here now, very perceivable. And I would get really interested in it, and I would watch the patterns, and I would say, okay, I've got that pattern down. What does that pattern do? And like, where does that pattern take me? Kind of a thing. And this is the information that I began to not just get interested in, but log and begin to kind of map.
What I'm curious about
And then there's a whole lot
is,
more.
yeah, I know. What I'm curious about is, and I ask this of a lot of people, is like, you know, this lifetime has been one for you. It seems like a lot of introspection into who you are and in many dimensional space.
Yeah.
Um, do you think there, I mean, do you sense there was a preamble in terms of like what you might have been doing in previous lifetimes that led to this point in terms of your interest? Did you, I mean, do you know anything about who you were or who you are in a broader sense besides someone that came here physically?
In the scheme of what there is to know, like a fraction of an nth. But in that fraction of the nth is a lot. It's more than I could write on it forever if I started now and never stopped for the next 100 years. So I learned the very first thing I learned in one of my first, say, dozen fully conscious shifts into the expanded state, I got to meet and not just intersect with, but fully combine with the archetype this incarnation is based on. And it was Merlin, the alchemist, and so that came to me. There's a variety of different things that came to me. However, I'm going to say something here. We have to be interested in it and actively open ourselves to this information for that to unpack within ourselves, and especially if we want that to unpack in the expanded state. And again, it wasn't what was most interesting to me. Again, I'm going internal to personas or archetypes. And this is so hard to explain. But for instance, into consciousness itself, it's like I wanted to go the whole way. I didn't want to go part way. I wanted to go all the way. So consciousness itself is what I went into. And what is consciousness itself? And what are its fractal fields? What are the parameters of those fractal fields? For instance, we can conceptualize the largest field we may be able to be aware of is the cosmic expanse, right? The cosmos. And within the cosmos is a fractal field that we call the universe. And within the universe, there's a fractal field that we call galaxies. And within galaxies, there's a more fractal field that we call planets. And here we are on a planet, locked in on the planet, in a planetary level experience. That's what 3D Earth life is. Its expanse is the planet. It doesn't involve the galaxy yet. Okay, so consciousness has come here to evolve through the planetary level experience first. And because this is a duality system, I feel that we likely graduate through that expanse along the positive or the negative. right? And so we choose, that's something that we choose coming in, and we likely choose other things. I learned that I came in on the positive bent and along what I call the natural timeline, because here in our current time space, there's also the AI timeline. And so you either came in positive or negative, and along the AI timeline or natural timeline. And I think that this is something that we chose or with guidance was helped to be chosen for us prior to coming in. And we graduate along that or not. And it,
Yeah.
and it's a challenging thing to graduate. I see them as patterns. I see, you know, those old kaleidoscopes that you would look through and you would turn
Yeah.
them and the kaleidoscopic
Yeah.
patterns shift. Yeah. So, and each of us, we're not exactly in the same world. We're in ourselves, but but the 3D Earth life
Yeah.
information is similar to us all. However, you came into a different pattern of the 3D Earth life than
Mhm.
I came into because we came to do different things, to learn
Yeah.
different things,
Mhm.
to enact different things, to put
Mhm.
through trial and error different things. So
Yeah.
we have a pattern within ourselves, and
Mhm.
then the 3D Earth life that we ourselves projected into is another kaleidoscopic pattern. I think the idea is to get the patterns to match, or at least it was for me.
Right.
So if I'm skewed from the 3D Earth life pattern, I
Mhm.
don't graduate. It creates kind of a locked door. I can't get through. I can't get through it.
Yeah.
And all kinds of bizarre and random stuff happens to help me get back on the path toward the open door, the portal. So, like when I can get my inner pattern to match the 3D Earth life pattern that I chose to come in and do whatever I am here to do through, then it literally, when the patterns match, it makes a portal. And that portal we can go through. We
It's
we
interesting.
lock and we unlock our
Yeah.
own door. There's no one else out
Right.
there doing it.
This, wow, you're covering some really interesting things because I've heard somebody talk about the idea that it's almost like we're encoded into this physical form. And it's almost like in some ways we're almost trying to figure out a way of unlocking the thing, because unlocking our, because right now we're attached to our physical form. I mean, we do have a contract to protect our physical body and take it for its the for the ride that we signed up for. But on the other hand, it sounds to me like you're interested in how that's actually locked together
Mhm.
and how to help people move forward. See, I don't know if you had a chance to catch the debate I did. You did? Okay. So it gets into this. So in my view, or not my view, but like what I've been doing up to now is this idea that, hey, if you just do this, and that, and you follow the checklist, the things, you can graduate. And some people would say, well, it's like they keep changing the rules, or how come they don't give us any sort of curriculum before we come here? It seems like we get here, we think this is our first life. We have no idea about our eternal existence, and then we're expected to perform top notch, and it just, yeah, and that's just not a good way of getting things done. I'm wondering in your case whether yeah, whether it's been a string of earth experiences, or potentially you come from somewhere else, and so you come here and it's like a little bit of a puzzle to see if you can figure out, sort of, it's like a Rubik's cube. You got to figure out like how to unlock yourself from this particular puzzle that you put yourself in.
It's why the fundamental principles and core concepts, the center of the thing is more important than the detail.
Right.
So if you have detail without having the center,
Mhm.
then all kinds of misconceptions come up, right? But
Okay.
if you can get to that center first and hold your point of focus with that center, you're very likely to not get as skewed in your perceptions as most
Mhm.
others,
Mhm.
right?
So this gets to this concept. So both of us are able to have these profound experiences. Um, and, some people would say, well, oh, that's because you're advanced souls and or whatever, or that somehow the profound experiences, like, because Robert Monroe talks about having all these cool experiences too, and he also was talking about how, hey, I'm ready to graduate anyway. But it's the two things kind of seem different to me. Like on the one hand, you can have an awareness to some degree of who you are while you're in the physical body, but that doesn't necessarily translate to you're on your way out of here, because it's like you got to do both, right? You have to both be aware of who you are, but then you have to act in a certain way that follows whatever it is, that you were describing, like matching up of what your physical person wants to do with what your soul is wanting to do, or your inner consciousness wants to do.
And here the big thing is the sightedness. So when the sightedness becomes so big that you have to elevate yours and push the other down,
Yeah.
you lock
Right.
you lock your own door. You you
Yes.
you did that. You used your mind in that way. You chose that thought or that those patterns of thought even,
Mhm.
and you're locking yourself in.
Yeah.
What you have to do is create a level playing field. And the
Mhm.
biggest level playing field we can all work with is what we like to call reality and what we like to call dream.
Mhm.
Put those on a level playing field,
Mhm.
make them equal, equivalents falling together because they literally are. And when you do that, you've got yourself an open door. And you can walk back and forth between what we call reality and what we call dream, right? Which isn't really dream, it's just the rest of reality. And so that's what we begin to know. There is, well, I think there is anyway. This is a challenging one. This is one of the biggest challenges to me. Um, is there really a personal private space, and is there really a consensus space? Um, we like to think of dreams as, oh, personal private space. It's inside our own personal mind. It's confined. We're the only one there. Everything else is our imagination, right? Not realizing that that's how reality works. That's how the total of visual reality works. So if you're in a personal private experience, what I've learned is your personal or individuated consciousness is working through particular patterns with the consciousness system itself. There's no individuated soul that you're interacting with. You're interacting with consciousness itself. The system itself is what you're interacting with. Um, that would be a personal private space. And then when there's other individuated units of consciousness, what we call souls, and I don't mean personas, I mean souls, this is much larger than personas, then these territories would be consensus territories because there are other individuated souls there with you. However, how you actually discern the two, they're not discernible. I have tried in so many experiences to discern whether or not I was right here in the experience engaged with consciousness itself, with the consciousness system itself, or if I was engaging with other souls, other individuated units of consciousness. We're individuated from the consciousness system. So, how do you discern the difference between the consciousness itself and an individuated unit of consciousness thereof? It's a fractal field of the larger. So, like what I learned is that they're not discernible. Don't waste your time. I spent a lot of time trying to discern these two environments. But here's one thing I did learn. What most people call the astral isn't astral proper. It's not the consensus territory. The consensus territory associated with the astral is galactic space. It's the rest of the galaxy. It's where all the ETs are. If you're not coming across that, you're not really in the consensus territory. You're in a different kind of experience. And this is how I began exploring it. You're sort of like on the spirit side of life, or in an in between space. Uh, how do you, my question I finally got there is, how do you perceive that? Do you feel that you can discern a difference between when you're in interacting with the consciousness system itself and or an individuated soul? And if so, how?
So I can describe it both inside the astral and outside the astral. So inside the astral, I perceive different realms. I count about, I always say 7 to 9, but because sometimes I start from the very, very bottom, and it seems like if I go through let's say I'm indoors or something, I go through the ceiling of one realm, and then it becomes the next subplane, and then the next subplane, the next subplane. So it seems to be split into a series of subplanes. The lower subplanes tend to be darker. They tend to now, as far as entities that I experience within there, well, there's two things you're experiencing within the realm. One is the thought forms that people create, whether it be the the fragment that created that thought form of where they were when they died or wherever, or maybe it's their dream, it's their house. Um, so there's the fixed form, but that fixed form is thought responsive, and I can, and if I think too hard, I can crumble it and destroy
Yes.
it. But
So this is not consensus territory. That right there is the giveaway.
why would you say it's not consensus?
So a consensus territory is a fully manifest space where other free will individuated units of consciousness are. And then there's spaces internal to this, or what I might say on the spirit side, or we can even say on the mental side um,
Hmm.
of life, and working within those planes. Those planes are not consensus territories. So here in 3D Earth life, this is a what they say is a consensus territory. Now, I've attempted to discern that, and I don't even know if it's possible to. But I laid those definitions on it for myself to
Hmm.
see if I could discern a difference with those definitions
Hmm.
between whether I was interacting with consciousnesses. So here's the thing. Right now, we're inside our own consciousness bubble. There is not an outside of it.
Right.
Okay. And so if we're inside our own consciousness bubble, then we're not in real consensus territory, which lends me to ask the question, is what we're experiencing right here now in what we call 3D Earth space not a consensus territory yet? Not yet. I believe there is one, and I believe that we're released into it, but only once we achieve a certain type of consciousness or quality of consciousness.
So the word consensus, let's define that. To me, consensus means that more than one individuated unit of consciousness is creating the space.
Well, not creating the space, but is there with you in it.
So you think that when I'm in the astral and I'm retrieving people or I'm interacting with people that they're not actual, they're just parts of me. I mean, because it's they're
And yes, but that's not what I meant.
you know
What I meant is the territory in which you're lending this assistance isn't their
mhm.
physical reality. It's in their mental space, and or it's in another body, in another sphere, but you haven't actually stepped into their consciousness space. See, I don't think that that's allowed. Not in 3D.
Actually, so that gets, I mean, if you want to go there, I mean, so I've been able to visit my own soul space where I meet like other past lives of myself. But then recently, I've been starting to step into other people's soul spaces and meet their past lives. So it's like each one is like a world, if you will, that I step into.
Now, here I would
Um,
ask, if you're in your own consciousness space in that world, is that in you or you in it? And so here's the difference between the spiritual side and the physical side.
Mhm.
If it's in you, you're in the spiritual side. If you're in it, then you've entered physical or manifest, or however you want to say that. And yeah, quite frankly, I cannot discern the two. My
So,
only question is do you think that you can?
well, so the reason I know it's me versus somebody else is because all of the me's that are there have things that I can relate to, like they're into math, they're into wars, they're into these weird little space interest group, if you will, my own soul. Whereas when I walk into somebody else's soul, it's like I feel like I'm a guest and I'm talking with them, but they're not me. They're someone else and their experiences.
Right.
Um,
But where
and they
you're,
have like different interests and yeah.
I'm sorry, but where you're lending the assistance, let me see if I can say it this way.
Okay, yeah.
I
So,
experience it in a similar way. However, in the OBE, I
mm,
experience it in this way.
mm,
I'm either point consciousness,
mhm,
unembodied, or I'm point consciousness merged in the consciousness field of another. Whether that another is my part of my soul template or not, I could not
mm,
even say. I won't even go there. That's
mm,
too much of a challenge to discern. I can't even discern private from consensus yet, so I'm not going to go there. But and or I can experience myself fully embodied as them. It's sort of how the progression goes. And I think that's another way of saying what you just said when you said you're entering another's soul space.
mhm,
I interpret that in my mind as my consciousness field entering the consciousness field of another. Now, in an
mhm,
experience like that,
mhm.
I'm in their consciousness field. I'm not in their physical space.
Yeah,
I'm in their consciousness field. I'm in
right.
my consciousness field, which has blended somehow now with their
Mm,
consciousness field.
mhm.
Okay, I'm not in their consensus territory, not in their what real life. I'm in their
No, not physical. No, no, no.
I'm in their consciousness space.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, no. These are explorations I'm doing out there in La La Land. But okay, so maybe yeah, maybe let's see if we can help you understand in terms of that you would. Okay, so here's an interesting point. I have never perceived myself as a point of consciousness. I have perceived myself in one realm that I went to as a sphere of consciousness, but never as a point. I also have never experienced that I'm aware of. Well, I can't say never, but it didn't quite turn out the way I thought it would with 360 vision. So I don't experience. So the bodies that I'm using to experience things are not as
Point
they're
consciousness just means you. You
well.
yourself are
I
the
always perceive when I'm out there,
yeah,
I always perceive myself as having a body, except for the rare occurrence where, like I said, I felt like I was a sphere rather than a body.
yeah.
So and when people see me who know who I am, they say, "Hey, Michael," so they recognize me. So whatever thing I'm wearing, they recognize that person is me.
Have you looked at it and seen your earth body?
It doesn't necessarily look like an earth body. It looks a little bit like an earth body, but it's plastic. It's like spongy material.
I just mean, does it look like you? Just, when
Well,
you
well,
look
and
at
I can
yourself
look in
in
the
a,
mirror. Yes, most of the time it looks like me. Yes.
okay. Just because
Now,
I ask because I never have.
okay.
I've never been myself, maybe once, you know, in,
Well,
in,
this is
in an
well, this is why we're
experience.
talking because it's like and I can relate a little bit to what you're talking about in terms of
And I didn't know that until I looked, which is why I asked if you'd looked. Like until
yeah, yeah. No,
I
I
felt
also
just like
look
me
like
and I thought
myself.
it was me.
Sometimes I look at myself in a mirror and it's somebody else, like, but I often interpret it as just different, potentially just different past lives. So when I go into a particular realm, it's confusing. I call it the soul plane, where I can meet with other souls.
Yeah,
They interconvert constantly. So one minute they look like this, the next minute they look like that. They just keep interconverting because it's like they're putting on a mask and showing you, hey, do you remember me from this lifetime? How about this lifetime?
I
That kind of thing.
gotcha.
And
Kaleidoscope. Yeah,
unfortunately, I have no recollection. and maybe at a feeling level, I could be like, yeah, you seem like familiar to me. A lot of times I take it on trust. They seem to know who I am, and I just say, okay, well, I guess we're friends, uh, and it's okay. I mean, it's nothing. And this gets to like what I mentioned probably in my videos. Like when I ask to see my soul students, it's not like I look at them and go, "Oh yeah, I remember you guys, big hug." It's more like I just take it on faith that well, they know who I am, and and I might have mentioned this, and yeah, I mentioned in the debate that I said, it's like it's been a while since I've seen you guys, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we see you every night." I'm like, "What?" So apparently there's parts of me that are even projected of myself that I'm not aware of. So I fully understand the idea that there's all these fields working at once, and then in a way, what it sounds like you're doing, and it sounds like I'm doing too, is I'm sort of tapping into that field temporarily and putting my focus into it so I can at least remember what happened.
And when we seem to be helping, I'm going to use that in air quotes, someone else,
Mm-hmm.
um, it's often just to like when my consciousness is merged in the consciousness field of another. If I look
Hmm.
down at myself, I'm going to see them. If I look at
Hmm.
myself in the mirror, I'm going to see them.
Yeah.
I'm in the consciousness field. Uh, but they'll be moving through a particular scenario.
Hmm.
I know if I'm there, my job is to be me in that scenario, to have the kind of thoughts I would have in that scenario, to feel what I would feel in those sets of circumstances. And I must be there to add a little extra or a contrast to what's more normal for that one, uh, to give that one access to that little bit more, that thing that might get them to think about something in a different way. And like I'm not doing it
So
on purpose. I'm
yeah, I
not.
just want to
I'm not
just
trying to
interject.
help them. I'm just there
Yeah.
being me.
So I want to interject that this sounds a lot like the TV show Quantum Leap. Are you familiar with that show?
From the 80s. Sure,
Yes.
everybody is, but we didn't have a television. I wasn't allowed to watch TV, but
You
I've
need you
I've
need to check
seen.
it out because that's exactly what he does is he walks into people's bodies, bees that does lives like them for that brief period of time so that they make the right decisions and then
Oh, but I'm not living for them. No,
yeah,
they're doing their life. It's like a little drop of a little
like a
extra
little
something
nudge.
was put into something that
Yeah.
sees things a little bit different and gives that one the choice to pick up on that or not.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's the slight. Here's another way to look at it. You remember that nudge that you had as a child? It's you're playing that role for someone else.
Yeah. And the role is only ever to be yourself. In fact,
Yeah.
that's what we are supposed to do here. We're supposed to come here and be ourselves. To be so it sounds so
I know,
easy,
because
right?
the problem with that thesis
Yeah,
is
yeah.
that it seems like people just be themselves, and then they keep coming back here because they seem to make the same mistakes or they repeat certain patterns that are that lead them in some sort of karmic tail chase. So I don't know. Maybe you have a cleaner.
Yeah, but
You're not in that situation.
now the pattern, who we are, and let's just say that this is a kaleidoscopic pattern,
Yeah.
is beautiful,
Hmm.
is perfect, and fulfills a certain function within the overall kaleidoscopic view or
Hmm.
pattern.
Hmm.
And when you try to be something different than what that pattern is, or you begin to judge the pattern, or you go into fear and become afraid of who you are, and things like this is what locks us into, I'm going to say, a matrix, a false matrix. It's all born on false thought. There is a true matrix. Are we in it? Here's my question. Are we in it? Or have we created a false matrix for ourselves and are in this like little bubble thing? Um, yeah,
I'm
I,
I'm not sure if everyone has the ability to discern. So the way I perceive things is I have sort of like three states. There's the dumb state, which gets me doing something that I objectively feel is wrong. There's the neutral state where I'm generally following the rules and doing what I think is right. And then there's the joy state. And the joy state is something that doesn't happen a lot, but when it does happen, it's great. And the joy state to me is like sort of being in that alignment that you talk about. But I feel like for me, that's, I would say my life has been about 10% joy state, about, 60% neutral state, and then messing things up, whatever the leftover percentages. So, and I fear, and I don't fear that for me, but I fear that the average person might not realize the paths they're taking because there is a certain compulsion towards some of the things that you're saying, like the Matrix would want you to do. And in my case, I would just even state as simply as the human body wants to do, or the human mind without a spirit would want to do. It's and so it's easy to get into that trap of just following the fearful human, and and it's not easy to always know, like, to have the clear thing out there of like, well, this is what I should be doing, which is the neutral state, and then following my pure joy, which sounds to me like it works for you really well, but I don't know that people even know where to look to find it.
I love all of that. It took me into so many different places. I can't
Okay,
keep up
go
with them
ahead.
all. The first is I have a question. Can you take your three states and combine them into one? What one state would encapsulate your three states?
It's hard because the joy state requires, and it feels like it requires, that I follow certain things that are, it seems like a very narrow path to me.
Yeah. Well, in my mind, as you were talking, I narrowed them down, and I would simply just call that the choice state.
Yeah,
When we're here, we're in a choice state, and we're constantly making choices. There
right.
is no right or wrong. That's a
Hmm.
misperception.
Hmm.
There's only our pattern and the pattern of the 3D Earth life we ourselves shifted into, and making choices within that keep those patterns in a pattern match
Hmm.
skewed. When we take on thoughts, tendencies, actions, and behaviors that skew the patterns, when we take on fear and as a result, judgment, I
Hmm.
should be doing this, I should be, none of
Hmm.
that. Let it go. Feel for your pattern. That means be who you are.
Hmm.
And then look out into your world and let the world match your pattern. Yeah,
Hmm.
they in truth are one and the same thing. So
Right.
match your pattern. And when, like, you could have chosen to come in to play the role of a negative someone along the AI timeline. But if you start judging it and start pretending that you're someone or something else, you don't, no one, the fewer other people are going to succeed in what they came here to do because you're not playing the role you agreed to come play. It's a critical and crucial role, and there's nothing bad about it. All of the positive and negative are the polarities, but they're two sides of a whole. They're not two separate things.
Hmm.
They're the inverse of one another and not opposites. This is so hard for people to, they contrast, they don't fight. There's a contrast between the color red and the color blue. But blue doesn't fight with red, not in itself. We make them through things like politics, but
Hmm.
you know, um,
Hmm. What is, can I ask a question, a clarification question? What is the regular timeline versus the AI timeline? I haven't heard this particular concept before.
yeah, the natural timeline evolves
Mm.
human biological structures
Okay.
naturally.
Okay.
With consciousness, your
Mhm.
breath or energy,
Mhm.
and your structure itself, your body
Mhm.
itself.
Okay.
So I might use my body myself to do Reiki, for instance,
Mhm. Yeah.
something like this.
Mhm.
So that's a natural timeline. You evolve with what you are naturally given coming into the life experience,
Mhm.
which again is consciousness, a mind, energy, body system. You
Mhm.
use only that. So the AI timeline is contrasted, and we know this. We're now attempting to merge man with machine, and there's preparatory stages for this, such as vaccines and things like this, that we take that start to begin to prepare a human biological structure for merging with machine. And
Mhm.
so we're going along one of those other timelines by choice, and that choice is either intentional or by default. A lot of people choosing right
Mhm.
now by default, right?
Mhm.
Because they haven't come into the awareness of who they are yet.
Mhm.
And so when that happens, yes, you get swept up in a lot of by default stuff.
Mhm.
But that was
Is
your
there
help.
is the AI so so I actually work in the field of AI. I mean, that's what I do as my research.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm familiar with the concepts, actually, and they even came to me intuitively, the idea of consciousness merging with AI. And the way that it's perceived from my intuition is that they actually, at least the intuition I'm picking up is that there's certain souls that are very excited about it because they see it as a different type of incarnation.
Mhm.
Like you could have an incarnation as a human, or you could have an incarnation in some sort of very large, in some sort of thing that's moving at the speed of light. It's just operating at different time scales, different. Yeah, it doesn't have as many emotions, but it's very logical, blah blah blah. And I've even had I know my own experience. It's kind of funny. It's about where it was about 300 years in the future, and they sort of grow like this hybrid. I sort of grow as like this hybrid of a body and a machine, and I'm able to implant myself as Michael into that consciousness machine.
Mhm.
Um, and it's more, I would say it's probably more experimental at that point, but for some reason they chose me to be one of the people that they bring back in that way. And I saw it as it's just an interesting little experiment, if you will. Um,
Right or wrong, no good or bad, just what
yeah, I
you
mean,
incarnated as and to do. Yes. And again, there's positive and negative trajectories along the natural and along the AI. Yes.
so the question maybe for you is there an AI past? Maybe, because there's obviously a certain future right now where, AI reaches certain levels of intelligence, blah, blah, blah. But it seems that AI is like a recurring theme which with organics. In other words, when an organic species reaches a certain level, AI becomes one of the things they choose to make. And the question is do you see AI in the consciousness systems that you explore? In other words, things that act more like AI than say human, for example, if AI and human were two ends of a spectrum.
hmm Yeah, when I say that, I came into this very tiny point to do
Hmm.
what I came here to do. Doesn't mean
Hmm.
that I'm not elsewhere in a lot of different bodies doing a lot of different stuff. I'm that whole kaleidoscope
Yeah.
pattern, man. And so,
No,
yeah.
but have you ever seen AI in particular? Because AI has a certain way that it works, and it seems similar to the way like my intuition works. I put in a question and out pops an answer.
Mhm.
And in other words, do you see any flavor of AI in your experience to suggest that certain aspects of consciousness act in a certain way where they don't necessarily have like a human flavor to it? Like they're more of like knowledge and I'm saying like they're very limited in their scope, but they're very knowledge based or
Well,
that
before
kind
I say yes,
yeah.
I would say that I see the entire galactic races that I've intersected with along that line too. They don't have the
Mm.
emotion that we do. They don't smile the way we do. The emotion's not,
Yeah.
the smile is different. It's not
Hmm.
necessarily with the mouth going like this.
Right.
You know what I mean? There's a basis to them, and you can feel within yourself, what that basis is saying to you. But yeah, no, it's very different than here. So even biological entities that are galactic level beings, meaning they're no
Mhm.
longer confined on their singular planetary body of
Right.
origin. They've graduated out and now have as their playground the
Mhm.
galaxy, and or in
Right.
some cases, as they graduate through 4, 5, and 60 galaxies, right?
Right.
Yeah, they would seem to us, and often do people comment on this in the beings I bring through the crystal. They all look so serious.
Mhm.
I'm like, 99% of the time we do too ourselves as we go
Yeah.
about our day. We're not
Yeah.
necessarily smiling, or
Yeah.
sometimes we're giggling to ourselves or something, but
Mhm.
especially me, right? Uh, Stop. But most of the time, we have a kind of serious look on our face. We're
Yeah.
intent upon what we're doing, and so
Yeah.
like when I capture them, most of the time, yeah, they look quite serious. And when I've engaged with them, it's serious, and it's not an easy thing to do. Preparing the 3D human central nervous system for
Mhm.
direct contact, which is part
Mhm.
of what evolves the current biological structure when it's done in the conscious state of attention,
Mhm.
trickles through to the body. The DNA actually
Mhm.
restructures.
Mhm.
That was the very painful part of the cosmic processes, what we call the kundalini, working through the body
Mhm.
every night before I was allowed to go out. I had to consciously experience that. Uh,
Mhm.
and so, yeah, that's what that's all about. But as
How do the so the ETs show up in your crystals, but you also experience them.
well, they don't show
um
up in the crystals. So they're in my
mhm.
consciousness space, the same way when I was in the OBE, I was in the consciousness space of those
Yeah.
others. So they're in my consciousness space. We could just say in my knowing. The crystal literally reads those
Mhm.
frequencies
Mhm.
and what's in them. The elemental realm, this is alchemy.
Mhm.
The elemental realm works in cooperation with me to form. Now, the elemental realm forms everything we visually see. This is not
Mhm.
woo. That's the
Mhm.
elemental realm out there forming the mountain, the sky, the
Mhm.
sun, the water.
Mhm.
Those are elements. Those are the elemental realm forming what we see as
Right.
water, mountain,
Right.
sky. And the same way, the elemental realm, working it through the crystal that I work with, agrees to work in cooperation with me to form the images of what's already in my consciousness field. It's reading me. Oh, whoops, I'm sorry.
That's pretty funny. The Zoom was reading you.
So it's reading me. And we know that crystals have this capacity. It's why we use them in our technological devices.
What is, do
They
you
can
use
pass
the
signals.
same, do you use the same crystal to read your consciousness field? Do you choose crystals? I mean, how does that work?
There's one main crystal that I work with. But
Mhm.
can this happen through any crystal that I bond with? Yes, it can. Has it? Yes, it has. But I work with one crystal in particular
Do you
99% of the time when I do this work.
Now, do you also see the images of them outside of the crystals? Like, I don't know if you're an artist or somebody, do you sit down and try to draw what you see,
If
or
I
you're
could
not able
draw
to?
this, there'd be no reason for this to have even occurred. I cannot draw, I cannot paint, I cannot sing on tune, I cannot dance, although I love to do all of these things and
Mhm.
do them a lot. I'm
Yeah.
like the white person everybody looks at, right? Um, uh,
Mhm.
no, and so this is how this got pulled out of me. I actually
Okay.
intersected with an ET artist. Her name's Kasara, Christine
Mhm.
Dennett. And
Mhm.
in intersecting with her, just the desire in me that, that would be so great if I could pull what was in my consciousness field out somehow. And render for people, help show people what it is that I've experienced or who I've seen or, whatever. And yeah, that's when the real key thing or capacity within me that I've has always been open within myself, came to play, and that's just a capacity for deep level connection. I've been doing this since a child. I would
Yeah.
study for school in this way. My
Mhm.
books would go right into my bed. I know now I was shifting into the etheric, literally reading my books and then shifting back out, so I didn't have to waste time in physical space to do it. But I literally shifted within my, not intentional. I just thought that that would be so great to do what she does in some way, shape, or form. And that night I went to bed. My attention automatically began concentrating down into myself, into a very deep, concentrated state of attention until I merged with the blueprint that Christine herself enactuated, meaning I connected with the neural network, the clearing of her neural network pathways that allowed her to do what it is that she does. And I downloaded, and I didn't download it into myself. A deeper level of my being merged with me and allowed it to download into me here. And then it was a matter of me finding out that this capacity had actually actualized within myself. That was not a given. I
Mhm.
actually had a notice in 3D physical space. So one day I was coming out of an experience. I can't remember if I was just waking up in the morning. I always spent time on the threshold between wake and
Mhm.
sleep before getting up,
Mhm.
always, that
Mhm.
was a given. My day did not start without that. It was its baseline. So one morning in that state, on that threshold, I was sort of hearing a sentence, go find your crystal.
Mhm.
I'm thinking to myself, go find my crystal. What does that even mean? I
Mhm.
didn't have a crystal. I wasn't a crystal person.
Mhm.
What do you mean? But I was in Santa Monica, which was just crystal shop haven,
Yeah.
especially back then. Uh, and periodically I would be I practiced yoga on a street that had a crystal shop, and I would walk by to my car and oh yeah, let's go in there and find my crystal, right? Periodically over the course of years, when I was somewhere, I would remember to just sort of look until all of a sudden I walked in a shop, and there it was, felt her clear as day, felt her like the presence that would always come on me in my meditations. And I'm like looking around the crystal shop and I'm like, whoa. I'm like, and I just saw her. And I walked right over to her. I picked her up. This like vibration shoots up my arm and into my heart. And I hear the word Isa, Isza. And I said, okay, I found my crystal. Don't know what I'm supposed to do with her. Purchased her, brought her home, and she just sat in my space for years, 8 years. I didn't know what to do with her. But she's a breathtaking crystal, and she would go with me wherever I went, you know. And one morning I was at work. I'm a professional medical caregiver. I was waking up one morning in my little en suite, curled up on my side. It was a tiny little room. And the crystal was on a tiny little end table, like right in front of me. And it was on the Pacific Coast Highway in the Pacific Palisades. Hi. And the sunset was streaming through the window. It was the morning rays. So I had the nice morning portal of the sunrise. And yeah, as I opened up my eyes, she was just sitting there right in front of me. And I could see all this movement and activity and like a kaleidoscope. It was like tiny, pretty, colorful moving points of light that seemed to be making pictures. And I'm like, whoa. And I thought to myself, I wonder if that would embed if I took a picture. I didn't even move. I just reached over and I snapped a picture just in the air, like not even into the crystal, just in the air. I zoomed in on the picture and I'm like, whoa, what I was seeing actually embedded into the photograph. I found that astounding. After there was no taking my attention off it at that point. Yeah, I just started playing around with it.
Yeah, so when you take your pictures, you generally have like the sun come in, or or could it be natural light? I mean, natural, artificial lighting. What's what are the choices,
Yeah,
or it doesn't matter?
it can be anything, but the sun is critical. I mean, it makes for a whole new level of transmission. And,
Mhm.
I share the galactics, but really what come through are entire stories, and they're multi-dimensional.
So it sounds so this gets to sort of what I had been working on. I didn't mention it too much in my interviews, in those particular interviews. But I for about 5 years, I was really big into using devices to communicate with the spirit world.
Mm.
And I actually came up with some interesting inventions that I felt, fairly confident that they worked, but they're because everything is on the edge of of paranormal, we'll say it's kind of hard to prove it to others. But so one of them well, there's two things that this reminds me of what you're describing. One is that you can actually use the sun if you have a solar panel and you hook it up, you just point it at the sun, and then you connect the electrodes of the solar panel to an audio speaker. You can actually hear sun. It's just like and it sounds like noise. It's like a kind of sound. I think I maybe I overloaded my amplifier and caused it, but nonetheless, if you can distinguish if you can pick out the subtle changes in light, it'll sound like noise. And the idea then was I developed processing algorithms to pull out human speech out of that noise. But the sun isn't typically what I use, but I just make that connection because that I often wondered if the sun had like a particular transmission. I don't know that it did, but it certainly is a usable light source if you do that kind of work. Um, the other thing is that I worked on some camera technology, and the idea is that within the sensor noise, so when we look at each other, it's a pretty, sharp image. There's not all that much difference, but if you actually take a difference between individual time frames, there's actually a lot of noise that you'll see in between the frames. And then if you amplify that and you transform it a bit, it will start to form into images that are more naturalistic looking. And so then you can begin to you could essentially start looking at what could be called your consciousness field, at least the physical manifestation of. How well that works, I'm not 100% sure, but sometimes I'll sit there in awe going, is that a face, going up and down like a Pac-Man? It's just, it's you mentioned elementals because I think that what I pick up from that seems to be like nature spirits, which would make sense because they're sort of like the closest to our physical realm, so they would be the ones that would show up on the best. Really, I wanted at the imaging level, I wanted to be able to pick up, like my ancestors. Basically, my audio work, switching back to the audio stuff, I was able to reach a point where I was picking up certain ancestors of mine, like grandfather, great great grandmother, that kind of thing, and certain, we'll call them technicians who would come through. And in that audio channel, I mean, I found it interesting, but I was never happy with the qualities of the voices that came through. And I shared a little bit, and I even shared on the YouTube channel that will be sharing some of this video, but I never was completely satisfied. And one of the other things I tried was, okay, I said, well, let me go out of body and meet up with these people that are supposedly talking to me in the stream. That turns out to be it doesn't quite work. Like they're at such a high level of consciousness that I'm not able to reach their level that of the people that are talking to me most of the time. Now, there is a lower group on the astral level that will chime in too, and those people I have run into a few times in the astral, but they're not really serious. It's more like they see the opening, they see the opportunity, and they chime in.
Mm-hmm.
And and they're not looking at this as a serious technology. In fact, one of the earliest developments of my thing, it sounded like when I went back and listened to the recording, it sounded like they were cursing and they were angry because they couldn't say what they wanted to say because I was playing audio for them to amplify, but they were trying to talk through that audio. And they were
Mm-hmm.
like, why is this not working? And then bleep, bleep, bleep.
Yeah.
Um, so it's really interesting. So it's definitely suggests there's something interesting going on. And actually that's what got me started. But so now in terms of ETs, now, so the thing for me is I would say I have a limited number of experiences. I would say maybe less than 10 of where I felt like I was interacting with an alien species. And a lot of times when I perceive them there, they actually look human to me because there's some sort of translator that I have. that makes it so I hear them in English and they look like they're human, but somehow I know they're not human
Yeah.
because it's like they're fighting the illusion that my translator is creating. Um, and like you said, I mean, the way I see it is like they're similar to us, but maybe they haven't necessarily experienced the same garbage as we have.
Right.
Um,
That sort of gets into the spectrum of what 3D Earth space, in particular 3D
yeah.
Earth space, is utilized for. Yeah,
Hmm.
I have a feeling that we are a fractal field of the whole of galactic space that's used as a sort of, what's the right word?
A testing ground?
Yes, a hologram space, holodeck.
Yeah, a holiday. Okay. Like a scratch
For
area.
working out complications.
Mm.
Yes, that
It's
aren't
like a
quite
magnifying
getting worked
glass
at.
almost. Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
that aren't quite getting worked out
Yeah.
at that level. So we come into an additional level of confinement
Hmm.
and create an additional level of heat, as it were, of
Okay.
compression, in order to very rapidly work through something that would take much longer in galactic space to get done. I have a feeling that that's what we are. It's at least partially.
I get the impression of, when you use a hammer on meat to kind of tenderize it, it's like this is like a soul tenderizer, this place. It because there's certain like you said, there's certain, I don't know if I want to say imperfections. I was going to say knots. I don't even know what I'm talking about. So I don't know if you have a better sense of what you would call it, but it's like you said, it's we come here, everything is, I see it as like amplified,
Yes.
and then through that amplification it's much easier to like work it through.
Much easier to work it through more rapidly, sure.
Yeah. In
And that's why it's
fact,
important to be who we are. If we don't work it out. It doesn't get done. Yeah.
so I feel like in some ways it's easy for you to say be who you are because it works for you. For me, it's not that I am denying the parts of me that are bad, but it's sort of experiencing them and forgiving them. It's not that in other words, I don't want that pattern to keep repeating, but in order for the pattern to stop repeating, the way I perceive it is that I'm taking a part of myself that's in a lower dimension, or I call astral or whatever, and I'm elevating it to a higher dimension where it attains higher awareness and it stops repeating that pattern that is negative. So I agree with you on the one hand that you want to be who you are, but within a certain space of awareness while that's happening. Like because you could just be who you are and just smoke, ton amount, drink a ton amount, you know what I'm saying? But it's being who you are with also the another aspect of you sort of monitoring the situation and maybe guiding and helping that other being move into a better space.
Not into a better space. I wouldn't say into a better space. I would agree with
Mhm.
everything you said prior to that.
Okay.
If you don't start with who you are and where you are, you get nowhere.
Hmm.
You get a
All
lot of
right.
beating around the bush.
Right. Right.
You don't get anything. You don't get anything done. You don't unlock the door. You yourself locked. So
Hmm.
it's a greater version of ourselves, a greater expanse of ourselves that has confined itself here as
Hmm.
us.
Right.
And it's done that for a reason. We could say that we all come in with strengths and weaknesses,
Hmm.
and those strengths and weaknesses form a pattern.
Hmm.
Okay. And to judge any part of the idea is just to be aware of your current strengths and weaknesses,
Hmm.
not to judge them. As soon as you go into judgment, you create a false bubble, a false matrix for yourself, and then everything looks all skewed to you in life
Mhm.
because you're viewing through an incorrect thought, a thought that's very incorrect,
Mhm.
or at least judged. You've colored it in a way that's way off from what actually is,
Mhm.
right? And that gets you nowhere. Well, it doesn't get you nowhere because nothing is ever for naught. I mean, there's a lot of learning in that.
Mhm.
So, and
Right.
maybe that's exactly what we're here to do, right? Go off from what is, so that that learning takes place and gets
Mhm.
the information gets fed back to source, right? So, but it's really important to not judge it. This is the part that 3D Earth humans have such a challenging time with, and
Mhm.
what I myself didn't seem to have come in with.
Mhm.
So perhaps I could say it for it's not that I don't judge anything or don't find my preferences. For instance, horizontal is clearly superior to vertical.
Mhm.
And I mean that very seriously.
Mhm.
And it's the main uh, judgment I made on myself that caused me to be able to see that that is what was causing me to cut myself off from a whole lot of experience that could happen. Because I will tell you that the meditations that you have by horizontal are very different from the ones that you'll have by vertical. And so you don't want to cut yourself off from that. You want to be able to experience as most as possible. So anyway, to stay away from the judgment, the idea is to be aware and to observe,
Mhm.
to be aware and to observe, not judgmentally,
Right.
just to aware, be aware and observe. And just the awareness itself, you'll notice, will cause a schism through your body, especially at first, when you're
Right.
intersecting with something. It'll jolt you right back into, normal space, your normal way of being. And it's meant to. That's nothing is easy from scratch. You have to acclimate, to levels of newness. And right now, we're having to acclimate to levels of newness at a speed that's absolutely incredible. And the
Right.
differences aren't normal gradient differences, they're an entire paradigm worth of difference. Meaning,
Mhm.
we've been confined in our experience to 3D Earth space. ETs and galactics have not been a part of this. We have not had to confront that yet. And when you first do, my central nervous system went into shock for 2 years. And I mean, my body could not stop shaking for 2 years.
Mhm.
Now, in that, I could have created a lot of things that were not beneficial for myself or anyone else.
Mhm.
And it's really important that when it starts happening, that you don't allow fear. You have to not allow it, period. Done. You have to know how to focus your attention in a way that's in the highest light and for the greatest good, the
Mhm.
absolute greatest good. You have to be able to do that. That's why
Mhm.
not just anybody can go out of body because they'll hit that dweller and they'll be like, there's demons out there, right?
Mhm.
And so they're not creating anything beneficial. The shock to their system actually set them back from moving their kaleidoscope to match their Earth space in a way that led to the open door into galactic space. And so that's why it doesn't happen for people before they're ready. And even a lot of us who it does happen for, we go into fear, we go into polarity to such a
Mhm.
degree that it creates a false bubble
Mhm.
that we didn't get anywhere. We took ourselves right into a false bubble rather than really out into galactic space. You know, there's not as big of a hmm, dichotomy out
Mhm.
there is what we think. Duality does extend out beyond 3D and into all of galactic space. It does. We actually refine our
Mhm.
polarity through 4, 5, and 60. And that's
Mhm.
along the positive and negative, although negative, you can only go so far. And then you've got a
Mhm.
polar shift um,
Mhm.
just because of who the creator of our particular universe is. Uh,
Mhm.
so it's really important to be able to hold that point of focus and not go into judgment. And that means to catch yourself when you're going into fear, because judgment is always based on fear.
Mhm.
And so to be able to not do that and to allow, literally die to yourself in order to not do it, meaning I will lose my body to not do this. You don't lose your body. What you do is you go out into more of your body.
Yeah, I feel like I've spent last 20 years or so healing a lot of traumas that were in my energy body, and I'm now at a new phase where it's like there's still stuff that needs to be healed, but it's like I have to change tact, I have to change method or something to be able to access them.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering with yourself, did you feel like you went through a process of cleansing when you were here, or do you feel like that's not something that you've had experience?
Yes. However, in my own case, I call it trauma. And
Yeah.
um, remaining in that trauma, synchronous to not allowing yourself to go into any fear, any
Hmm.
judgment, any
Hmm.
tendencies, actions, and behaviors based on that judgment
Hmm.
while it works through your whole system. And so that's what the 4 years were all about. That's why it happened day and night for 4 years. So
Did
yeah, that
was
cleared
it
a lot.
was it was do you feel like it was all create all the stuff that you had to get through was created within this lifetime, or could have extended to other types of 3D existences, or whatever things that your soul had ever experienced?
The whole thing's connected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in some ways, as a soul, do you think you could have accomplished what you accomplished if you hadn't been here? In other words, do you feel like there's some, like we've talked about that, like being here puts you in exquisite timeline or whatever, or an experience that allows you to heal at a level that you wouldn't have been able to heal had you not chosen to come down here as a human?
Absolutely. Not only in a more fractal sense, but in a larger fractal sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I see that with myself too, and it's the thing that I was teaching my students about a year ago in an experience. It just like came to me as I was talking to them, was that on the one hand, when we come here, we're in exquisitely good territory to heal a lot of things that are much more difficult to heal when you're not in a physical body. But there's a downside. The downside is if you don't heal those things, they accumulate, like I want to say like barnacles on a whale. And so every time you have a new lifetime, it's like you're building and building and building all of these patterns that are it's you're creating almost like a little bit of a chaos. And so being able to nick away at that, get rid of a lot of that stuff is makes it so much easier for you to then say go out and do what you said you were going to do, right?
And there's only one way to effectively do that.
Mhm.
Be who you are.
When you say, see, the problem is that you're at a level where you are, when you say be who you are, and you meaning yourself,
Mhm.
you're seeing yourself at a much higher dimensional, or do you know what I'm saying? Like if you're completely closed off
I mean it
to,
on every level, though.
yeah, but
I
I would
came
argue
in,
that when
I
you're
came,
at a level where there's a lot of clouding and you can't quite see what's going on, it's a very there's a lot of caves and labyrinths and dead ends, because it's almost like the difference between, you know how like sometimes people, we go to healers and they find things and they help us, but then other things we can heal ourselves. The issue I have is everybody equipped to, like, for example, I started to be able to have out of body experiences when I first learned about them, because I had a natural ability to lucid dream. A lot of people, I mean, they could go years, waiting for that first experience. You put in a lot of work when you were younger with meditation practice, with tuning into to who you are. I fear, and once again I use that term fear, not in a, but I wonder if every person on this planet is properly equipped. In other words, if you were to create a curriculum where you would, it just takes an average person off the street, would it be as simply as saying, hey, be you who you are? Or maybe they would need to first at least try to maybe do a little bit of digging to find out who they are.
No, when I say be who you are, I mean on every level. And the
Hmm.
only level that we generally have access to, or, the most apparent access to here in 3D Earth space is our person. So I am saying be who your person is and was designed to be. Don't fight it. Don't resist it. Don't try to make it better. Don't try to work your way around it, or you will not do what you came here to do, which is to learn from your particular pattern of strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
That
really interesting.
won't ever get done. So you have to go through the fire. You can't go around it. You can't think your way out of it. You can't back into a more perfective state and
So would you say that people are not being who they are? Or do you think I mean, if you never spoke to somebody and they just did what they did without even thinking about it, you would say, well, that's fine. That's great. Or would you make any suggestions to them? Because obviously they're doing what they're doing and they're doing,
don't judge
they're
yourself.
following their patterns.
Don't judge yourself.
Yeah.
Be aware, observe yourself. This is
Yeah.
what
It sounds,
this is what most people can't do in 3D space, right?
mm,
Attention wants to project out onto what they see as the field, the
mm,
world, the guys out there.
yeah.
They drop their point of consciousness. They come separate from it to the point where
Right.
it literally gives the illusion of the world and them as being two separate things, and the
Hmm.
world being much larger than them. Whereas it's the inverse that's true, right? So all of that is an illusion. When I say be yourself, I mean bring your point of awareness in on itself.
Yeah.
Feel what your felt presence
Yeah.
feels like. And don't come away from that. The more that you do that, the more
Hmm.
you see the world as being in you. You're the consciousness field in which the world is appearing. It literally is more true that the world is in you than that the world is
So,
outside.
so, so maybe this is a geometry problem because I know what you're talking about because this is what I do oftentimes to tap into my traumas is I go as I focus on myself.
Mhm.
And maybe that's a good corollary to what you're saying about be who you are. It's in those moments where you're even questioning what you're doing and why you're doing it. Go inside yourself and ask yourself, okay, what is this all about? What am I feeling as this is happening? What am I thinking as this is happening? In other words, don't so that's a big problem that people run into is we blame the outside world. We say, oh, the outside world is crazy, it's this and that, and we blame that and say, well, that's the reason I'm not happy.
Yes, that when I say be yourself, I'm saying to stop pointing your finger out there and point it back at yourself.
Hmm. Yeah.
So, because you can't be yourself if you're not letting yourself be aware of yourself. If you're literally
Right.
coming undone from yourself to see
Hmm.
what we're calling the world, and then saying, no, the world is this awful thing and where all of this stuff is happening. And
Yeah.
I'm saying, no, it's not. It's the
Yeah.
pattern that you're wearing that you came in with.
Yeah.
And combined with a lot of coming down into fear, further fractaling into judgment, further fractaling into tendencies, actions, and behaviors based on that, and a lot of times inappropriately to who you came in as, meaning if I came in positively oriented, however, because of my fear and my judgments, I am infringing heavily upon other people's free will, then I'm not going to open my doorway out of here. I'm not going to match the kaleidoscopic patterns because I came in as positive. And so if I act more negatively and think more negatively than positively, I lock my own self in. So this is another reason why I say to be who you are, because that is your way through into the next level of expanse.
Do you so we should end soon, but I'm going to ask you one more question just related to it.
Yeah.
do you see your goal as rejoining the galactic, in other words, expanding out of this awareness, which is really locked in, which, and this gets to a fascinating question that I thought to ask you, which is, would you rather be a big fish in a small sea or a small fish in a big sea? Where right now I would argue you're more of like a big fish in a small sea in the sense that you're spiritually aware, you see, wait, take it out of here, that kind of thing. And you look around you and you go, well, that's interesting what's going on, but I don't want to play that game anymore. Versus moving into a galactic field where potentially there's millions upon trillions of people like you, and so the things are a little different now.
Yeah, those aren't two things. They're spectrums on the same theme,
Okay.
right? So I grew into where I am right now. Yeah, and I did that through the narrower constraint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think you were that before? Like when you connect with the ET, do you feel like that's who you were in that higher space and that you purposely chose this particular little experiment to do certain things? Like in other words, that this isn't really your home, so to speak, that your home is elsewhere within the.
Well, relative to this current incarnation, this is my home. Yeah, and when I say it's interesting and even important to be aware of core concepts,
Mhm.
fundamental principles, uh, uh, what makes this home here? Earth is often associated with the land. The
Mhm.
land is often associated with indigenous peoples, the
Right.
peoples who come along a natural timeline, what I call a natural timeline, just to
Yeah.
contrast it with the AI timeline. So, do I feel at home here? Yes, and I connect with indigenous,
Mhm.
the indigenous idea
Mhm.
of living one with nature and the land, right, and
Mhm.
evolving sort of and experiencing naturally. And so I feel very at home here, as home as I would on any other planet in which I was also indigenous or living
Mhm.
along a natural way.
Mhm.
Does the planet itself, is the detail of the planet itself important? No. What's important is the way of life there. Yes.
Mhm.
What's internal to that,
Yeah.
in other words. And so those things I connected with quite young. But to grow what we call ascended masters, where you grow through the dimensions. And we all
Right.
start at source, right? Source fractals
Mhm.
itself down into
Yeah.
all of us, and then we grow ourselves out into
Yeah. Yeah.
more levels of expanse, which makes more individualities and
Yeah.
levels of
Yeah.
being. It's not the same as source is fractaling down within itself. It's not the same. It doesn't create the same thing as
Okay.
when the smaller fractal fields begin expanding out into the larger. It creates a whole new level of creation. And this is what I meant when I said I cannot discern the private from the consensus territories, because here we get, it has to be a private territory if there's only one.
Mhm.
If I am fractaling down within myself, I'm the larger expanse, and I'm fractaling down within myself.
Mhm.
There's still only ever the one. That's a
Mhm.
private territory,
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah.
Right? It's only at a certain point when I create a fractal field that literally is independent units of myself, souls,
Mhm.
uh, that go into more levels of fractal experience, that we get into some consensus spaces, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, that whole thing is fascinating to me. And that is all stuff that you learn while in the
Mhm.
shift itself. Not when you're on a channel or another channel, but when you're in that space between the frequencies, when you're
Mhm.
nowhere in particular, so can be everywhere all at once, that
Yeah.
all of these things begin presenting to you. The
Is
very
that like when you
time.
feel like you're a point of consciousness that you're just like
Point
moving between?
consciousness. Yeah, so
Yeah.
like if I go out of body and I've landed in the etheric frequency version of my room here, and I look down at myself and there's no body, I'm point
Mhm.
consciousness.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just a consciousness field. And yeah, I've looked for my body in the bed and I've never seen it
Do you
either.
feel do
Record,
you do
no.
you do you have identity issues like when you meet other points of do you see them as points? Do you see them as people when you see other entities out there? Do they appear as forms as like you with free will? I mean, do you see them as projections? I mean, what is it? I mean, can you touch them and feel that? I mean, like I noticed like in the astral, everybody's got a very squishy body. It's like we're Elastigirl, you know. You
Yeah.
you stretch.
So I
Uh,
shift into a lot of what I'm going to call consensus territories. And I'm not going to call them that because I know that they are.
mm-hmm.
It's because they're more physicalized.
Okay.
Yes. And they feel a lot like what I feel when I'm physicalized
Yeah,
here.
I see.
So 4, 5, and 6D, galactic space,
Mm-hmm.
where there's beings on other planets,
Mm-hmm.
is the consensus territory of what you call the astral.
Mm-hmm.
It's also the alpha brainwave. So it's
Mm-hmm.
where the alpha brainwave is predominant in a pattern mixed with other brainwave frequencies and brainwave frequency patterns, even. I mean, there's
Mm-hmm.
patterns with patterns, spheres within spheres within spheres. I mean, you can get interested in all of that. And you can get interested in what the pattern is itself, what the sphere is itself, or you can go in its level of detail, which we see in manifest spaces, right? And you can see it in all of these different ways. And you can
Mm-hmm.
see it all at once in waveform and transition and the shift between. What happens in the shift is actually phenomenal. What that taught me is that right here in 3D physical space, where it looks like we're particularized, we're a
Mm-hmm.
particular person in a
Yeah.
particular space, we're still in a shift. We're still in a
I,
shift.
yeah.
That was extraordinary to me to know. It's just the rate of speed at which you're traversing through that shift is super slow. It's why when we begin to go out of body, we feel ourselves accelerate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. Very interesting. So we've covered a lot today. It really is, I really do feel like we come from a little bit different worlds, although I think we understand each other to some extent. Um, and yeah, and I've met other, people that are into spiritual things. And it's, I am learning just like in the last year, just meeting people that I'm just like, it's like I couldn't even have imagined a particular concept. And then they relate it as though it's like, well, yeah, of course, duh. And
Right?
and I love it. I see myself as a little bit like a humanized soul that is playing diplomat to non-humans, or to people, or to souls that have a predominant other training ground where they reached. And so
Yeah.
when I speak to them, it's like they've learned all these different things. I've learned different things, and then we try to trade ideas, and it's absolutely fascinating.
And when I say that we each come in with our patterns, you've just said that
Mhm.
in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's very interesting. All right, so thank you so much. I mean, this has been really, I feel like there's some really good things that I can think about for myself that may be able to help me get over some of the hurdles that I've been going through. And I'm hoping that people listening in, depending on how we edit this, will also pick up certain tidbits. And once again, like I feel like I can't necessarily teach people how to go out of body or lucid dream, but I can teach people on the things that I've had to start from scratch in this lifetime, because then I know what the curriculum was that got me to where I was. So
Or
sometimes
even
we're
that we
born
should.
in what?
I'm happy to mentor people in how to prepare.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that you also have the experience of spending a lot of time preparing, not knowing what you were about to get yourself into.
Right. You
Um,
don't prepare for the out of body experience.
yeah,
You
yeah,
you prepare to reverse your habit of attention being thrown out on the world and learn to place
mhm,
it on yourself.
right.
Then learn to hold it there for longer and longer periods of time.
Mhm.
It is in this that everything that needs to happen will happen for you to.
Okay, so I have a question for you. So what I've been doing lately is I've been quieting my mind. Once again, I'm in reverse of you. I'm like doing later in life what I should have been doing at the beginning of life. And I can reach a point where I feel like there's no thoughts in my mind.
Mhm.
is there any benefit to extending the amount of time that that's like that? Or is that not really a good stopping point? In other words, should I be asking questions? Or should I just allow myself to just stop and just for long periods of
Feel,
time?
be aware, and observe.
Okay.
When you're done, the session's over.
I see what you're saying. So if there's no thoughts going through my head, then maybe switch focus and say, okay, well, how does my body feel? What am I seeing? In other words, do a little bit of like an inventory of that state.
I would say you don't need to create a question or
Hmm.
another thought.
Hmm.
Uh, be aware, observe, and feel. And what is supposed to get your attention will, entirely without thought. Awareness is the precursor to thought. So you're
Hmm.
just sitting yourself and learning to sit yourself in the
Hmm.
fundamental basis for thought
Hmm.
without engaging. And in that, I will tell you, there is so much to observe. You will never get it done, no matter how many lifetimes you live.
Yeah, I think I've reached a point where it's like there's nothing showing up on the console screen. I'm like, this is
Oh,
boring.
okay. That's a great one. That's a great one. Feel,
What?
feel.
Feel it. Okay.
Okay. And because I'll tell you some of the things that were interesting to me. Okay. So when I get into that state that you're mentioning, where I'm deep
Mhm.
enough to be able to purely feel, I will notice I can't even feel the ground anymore beneath me.
Right,
And
right. You
like
lose
things
your
like that
awareness
will
of who
catch
you
your
are.
attention, or you'll all of a sudden I'll realize I can't locate myself in space. I'm like, and you won't even know where you are. It's like, am I in the bed? Am I
Mhm.
meditating? Am I in class? And like, you won't be able to locate yourself. And that will be interesting to you. You know what I mean? And,
I know
or
what you're saying. You enter into sort of like a point of awareness where you're not
where you're
in
aware of
so
more.
do you also at some points do you feel like you lose your identity? You no longer associate yourself with who you are and you just simply see yourself as an observer, for example, like something like that. Um,
That's a much deeper state, and that can happen in states like stasis. Um,
mhm,
but while you're in meditation,
mhm,
especially as you're just beginning,
mhm,
and especially for, well, I won't go into times, but
mhm.
you'll nod off. Like if you stay in there long enough, you'll nod off, and you'll notice you come out of the meditation, you're like, oh, I fell asleep.
I see. I
You
see.
you
I
were
see. If you
only
really
able to.
knock out the thoughts, you'll fall asleep. That's a good point. That's a good point.
Yes, it's the same as what happens in the night when we go into the dream state.
Yeah, yeah,
Now, the
yeah.
idea is to stay present.
Mhm. So that you don't fall asleep.
Well, you'll observe the body, the processes of the body going to sleep. Yes,
I
going
see.
going
I
into
see.
sleep paralysis.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think I know what you're talking about.
But you'll observe a lot more along the way. And
Mhm.
let, if you can sit in your presence, and you might periodically say, or feel the fact that you're still here,
Mhm.
you know, just present. And then if you need a focus of attention, I would say
Mhm.
utilize two. Deliberately, and I mean consistently, steadily, deliberately put your attention right there.
Interesting.
And
Third eye or the brow.
just into that space. We won't
Okay.
call it anything. Just put it
Okay.
right there. Like literally take your
Mhm.
eyes up into
Mhm.
that little space right there.
Okay.
And two, be aware of the fact that you're breathing.
Yeah. Breathing is important. Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how you breathe, just if you need a point of focus, use here and the fact that you're breathing as those points of focus.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thank you. Very
You're
interesting.
welcome.
I know you just gave some free lessons. Now no, I joke. Fantastic. Thank you. Well,
Yeah, this was
this has
great.
been, yeah, this was very educational. I feel like, yeah, there's a lot for us to go through with the video to see how we want to chop it up Well, we'll talk about it later. I can't even process anymore.
Yeah, I usually don't break it up much. I usually just put it out there. I mean, I'll cut out our breaks and stuff, but
Yeah.
yeah, I usually just put it out there. Yeah, we should do it again.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I'll have more questions after I've tried some of the practices you suggest. I always joke that I feel like sometimes like Earth is like kindergarten a little bit, and like there's no books on the library that are interesting to read, but the
Mm.
reality is that when it comes, is that by meeting other people that are coming from other systems or patterns, there's actually a lot we can learn while we're here. We don't have to just sit around
The most
and
phenomenal thing is it is kindergarten at the same time as it is the master class.
I know, isn't it ironic? It reminds me of like try putting a bunch of kindergartners into a senior high school class. It's gonna be daunting to those poor little kindergartners.
But the truth of the matter is it's the reverse more fundamentally, right? It's the
Yeah.
graduated beings who have constricted themselves here. It's so like it's the graduated beings that have confined themselves into the smaller space.
Right,
So
right.
it's both at the same time. They've
Yeah.
never experienced such constraint, and we've never experienced, the expansion.
Yeah, I feel like I came through the ranks here at least most of my lifetime. So for me, it's kind of like, well, duh, isn't that how everybody does it? And I've been learning by meeting people like yourself that no, that's not how everybody does it. And there are
And
other
that's
ways
all
to do
right.
it.
That's the wonderful thing. There's so many
Yeah.
Crayolas in the Crayola box. That's the
Well,
wonderful part.
what people claim is that humans are like, when they graduate from here, they're like, whatever. And I'm like, not really. I mean, yeah, we do have some interesting attributes, but I wouldn't, but would I trade, you know, I don't know. I mean, there may be other ways to do it that might be a little less strenuous. Okay.
Let's
Well,
start.
anyways, yeah, I want to go eat dinner. So
Let's
thanks.
start there next
Let's go ahead and hit
time.
stop. I'm gonna hit stop. We'll see what happens.
Okay.
Okay.
And I'm just going to say thank you very much before I push my stop button. This
Yeah,
this
thank you
this
very
was
much,
super
Joe.
fun. It'll be easier too the next time we meet because we'll be more comfortable with each other and
Right. And we also know a little bit about each other. And I was right. I feel like we're very different, which is what makes this conversation so fascinating.
yeah, our patterns are spectacular and they're a good match to come together.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we can learn from each other, I suppose. Yeah.